I heard the snip before I saw the cord fall. At 8:12 a.m. on a windless Wednesday, a man in an orange vest stood on my driveway with a pair of bright yellow bolt cutters and a clipboard that had more boxes than common sense. He looked like a traffic cone had learned to walk. The extension cord I'd run the night before, from my garage sub-panel to the place where my future EV charger would live, twitched, went slack, and kissed the concrete with a soft, defeated sound. "Stop work order," the man said, not unkindly. He pointed to the red tag that had been zip-tied to my meter like a scarlet letter for electrons. HOA called it in. Across the cul-de-sac, a golf cart-sized compliance vehicle idled like a mosquito with a pension. In the passenger seat sat Miranda Clay, our HOA president, wearing reflective sunglasses and a face that could have been carved out of a rulebook. Next to her, a younger guy, Adam, the compliance aide, held a digital camera the way some people hold beliefs. "It's a cord," I said, "not a casino." "Fire hazard," the vest said. He read my name off his clipboard. "Evan Lake." "That's me. Look, I'm just the contractor they hire to make sure the stoppage is clear. You gotta take it up with them." He gestured toward the cart. Miranda didn't get out. She lifted a hand the same way a judge lifts a gavel when no jury is present. "Section 9. 3, she called. "Unauthorized exterior electrical installations. It was plugged in overnight," I said, "inside my own garage." "And running under a garage door, across the driveway," she said, "where neighborhood children could trip." "At 7 in the morning?" I asked. "We enforce uniformly," she said. The sunglasses were mirrors. In them, I could see myself. T-shirt, coffee cup, the half-coiled cord like a garden snake. "I want to tell you, I kept my temper. I didn't. I did that thing where you smile with all your teeth and none of your kindness. I'm installing a level 2 charger," I said. "Permit application is in with the city. Submit proof," Miranda said. "Until then, stop work." The cart rolled away. The vest man put his cutters in his bag and gave me the occupational shrug of an unarmed mercenary. "Good luck," he said, and left a carbon footprint that smelled like paperwork. That was the morning I learned how much trouble a cord could cause and how far an HOA will go to make sure a future it doesn't understand arrives 10 minutes late. The story didn't start there, of course. It started 2 months earlier when my old sedan coughed its last heroic cough on I-35, and I decided to leap into the future with both skeptical feet. I bought a used EV, silver, sensible, the kind of car that makes accountants smile and mechanics bored. I'm a grid engineer by trade, which means I've spent a decade watching electrons try to behave and people try to tell them what to do. I figured charging at home would be the least complicated part of owning the thing. Our neighborhood, Cypress Bend, is the kind where the mailboxes match better than the marriages and the HOA covenants are thicker than the city code. I rent the end unit with the 3-car garage because the previous owner was a woodworker who loved space more than symmetry. The main panel is neat enough to make a utility inspector cry. I sketched a plan, run number 6 copper from a new 50-amp breaker to a NEMA 1450 by the back wall, mount the charger, label everything, and enjoy the quiet miracle of a full battery by morning. I emailed Miranda out of courtesy, not obligation. Installing a charger, licensed electrician, permits pulled, will keep exterior unchanged. She replied in 13 minutes with a PDF attachment titled Guidelines for Exterior Alterations and a sentence that tasted like styrofoam. EV chargers are not currently addressed. External cables are prohibited. Nothing external, I wrote back. All internal. She replied with the kind of yes that isn't one. Submit architectural request. 8-week review cycle. I read it twice. Then I read the state statute again, the one we'd passed last year, nicknamed the Right to Charge Law, which says homeowner associations can't unreasonably restrict the installation of EV charging equipment in exclusive use areas and must reply to applications within 60 days. And if they fail to do so, the application is deemed approved. I sent her a link to the law. "I'll submit the request this afternoon," I wrote. "The EVs will be in the interior of the garage, no external runs. Conduit is EMT inside." She didn't reply. The silence felt less like absence and more like coiling. I submitted the architectural package anyway. Load calculations, a one-line diagram, the cut sheet for the charger, the electrician's license, the city permit application receipt. I printed it to paper because paper is how HOAs imagine the world is conquered. I slid the bundle through the slot at the clubhouse like a kid turning in a homework assignment to a robot. Then I ordered the charger. Then the red tag appeared on my meter. Then a man cut my cord in half so the HOA could say it had prevented a trip hazard caused by a thing that wasn't plugged in. I called the city. Marisol at permitting picked up on the second ring and apologized like a human. "Electrical is about 3 weeks out," she said. "We can't inspect what isn't there, but you can absolutely do rough-in." "The HOA said stop work," I told her. She gave a small sound that wasn't a laugh and wasn't not. "The HOA can't restrict what the city permits," she said carefully. "If your work is interior, they usually have no jurisdiction. Your city permit is pending, and you're within your rights to prepare. Just don't energize until inspection." "Copy that," she added, and I could hear the smile in her voice. "We get this call a lot. People are learning the script." I learned the script the way I learn everything, by writing it down and testing the edges. I emailed Miranda, CC'd the board, and kept it simple. The state's right to charge law preempts HOA bans on EVs in exclusive use garages. My installation is interior, no exterior conduit or cables. City permit pending, licensed electrician scheduled. I will not energize the circuit until the city has inspected and closed the permit. Please confirm the board's receipt of my architectural request and the date it was deemed received. Under state law, an HOA must approve or deny within 60 days with a reasonable restriction, not a ban. She replied the next morning with a block of text that looked like a wall. "Till such time as your request is evaluated, all work must cease. The association reserves the right to impose fines for non-compliance. Additionally, visible cords or equipment in driveways are prohibited under Section 9.3. "I'm not running a cord," I wrote. "I'm running conduit inside a wall. Submit proof after work is complete," she said. "I can't complete it because you posted a stop work order." "Then do not complete it," she wrote, and I felt my blood pressure try to install a breaker of its own. My electrician, Dax, arrived 2 days later with a calm that looked like it had been purchased in bulk. He opened my main panel, tested a few things, nodded at the bus bar like it had passed a personality test, and said, "We'll be done by lunch." "HOA posted a stop work order," I said. "From the city, from the HOA." He glanced at the garage door. "Your door is down. The charger goes on that wall. The conduit goes inside that wall. I will be touching nothing but wood and wire." They cut my extension cord. "Then don't use an extension cord," he said, pragmatic. "We're not energizing anything today. We'll rough in. City inspection in a week. If the HOA comes, tell them to call the city or your lawyer." "I don't have a lawyer." "You might by dinner," he said, "but we'll try honesty first." Dax and his apprentice, Gabe, worked like a symphony with smaller tools. The EMT shone as it bent and nested. The disconnect sat exactly level, because Dax is a man who hates crooked things more than injustice. I held the ladder and fetched cold water and tried to look like a person in control of his destiny. At 11:21, the compliance cart rolled up again. This time, Miranda did get out. Adam filmed like a wedding videographer who'd lost the bride. Miranda stood at the lip of my garage and announced to the air, "Work must stop." Dax turned, wiped his hands on a rag, and smiled like a shop teacher. "Mom, we're a licensed electrical contractor operating under a city permit. We're performing interior rough-in. No energized circuits until inspection. Show me the permit," Miranda said. Dax pointed to the printed receipt taped to the stud. "Application number's right there. We also have the e-permit email." "Until it is approved," Miranda said, sharpening the word. "This is unpermitted work." "Not how it works," Dax said, still friendly. "The city allows rough-in during permit processing, so long as inspections occur before energizing. Your issue is with cords across driveways. We have none." Miranda looked over Dax's shoulder at the EMT like it had insulted her ancestors. "Visible from the street," she said. "Exterior aesthetics." Dax blinked. "It's inside the garage. The garage opens," she said. "Mom," Dax said, leaning just a hair into his consonants, "electric conduit exists in 3 states: inside, outside, and wrong. This is inside." I lost the battle not to smile. Adam kept filming. Miranda pivoted to me. "Fines accrue daily," she said. "This is your first notice." I nodded. "Great. Please send me the fine schedule, the authority under which you're issuing it, and the appeals process." She handed me a stapled packet that smelled like toner and defeat. I thanked her, and she left, which is not the same as losing. The first fine arrived that Friday, $150 for unauthorized exterior electrical installation, which was brave considering the installation was both interior and unenergized. I appealed with a letter that could have auditioned for a courtroom. The charger is installed in an exclusive use garage. The HOA lacks authority to ban it. The state law requires reasonable restrictions, not prohibitions. The work is permitted by the city. Rough-in is allowed pre-approval. No exterior impact, no visible conduit, no trench, no alteration to facade. The HOA's own architectural guidelines defer to city code for safety. The right to charge law imposes a 60-day deadline. The HOA's 8-week review is not a defense. Fines are contested. Collection attempts will be met with injunctive relief. I CC'd the board, my property manager, and, because I am a petty creature when provoked, the city attorney's office general email, which in our town actually routes to a person. They scheduled a hearing for the following Tuesday in the clubhouse. Clubhouse hearings are to justice what microwave dinners are to cuisine. Technically edible, often disappointing, strangely fast. I arrived with Dax, in his company polo because symbolism matters. A 3-ring binder, because symbolism matters more than we admit, and a copy of the state statute printed on paper heavy enough to count as a threat. Miranda sat at the head of a glossy table under a print of a sailboat on a lake our neighborhood does not have. The board members were a stage show in 3 acts. Ray, retired, practical, allergic to waste. Leah, kind, cautious, once a teacher, still thinks meetings can be nice. And Brent owns a landscaping company that looks suspiciously like the one with the HOA's contract. Miranda summarized the offense: unauthorized exterior electrical equipment visible from the street, safety hazard, no approval granted, fines begin at $150 and escalate. I presented my case like a person who knows the audience would rather be anywhere else. I kept to short sentences. I used numbers. I avoided adjectives. State law prevents HOAs from unreasonably restricting EVs in exclusive use areas. The charger is inside my garage. There is no exterior conduit. There will be no cord across the driveway. City permit pending. Electrician licensed. Inspection scheduled. Not energized. Your consent is not required for interior work that complies with city code. Ray leaned forward. If it's inside, why are we here? Miranda didn't blink. Because when the garage door is open, the equipment is visible and impacts our aesthetic harmony. Dax couldn't help himself. Sir, ma'am, electric meters, water heaters and lawnmowers are also visible when garage doors are open. Brent frowned at the phrase aesthetic harmony, like it was a bush he could build to trim. Isn't there a rule about visible conduit? In exterior walls, Miranda said. Is the garage exterior? Leah asked. Yes, Miranda said. No, Dax said, smiling. No more than your pantry is exterior because you open the door. Ray made a sound that most men over 60 use for "he's right and I hate it." Miranda pivoted to safety. There is an elevated risk of fire. Dax cleared his throat. The charger is on a dedicated GFCI circuit with load calculations under NEC 62554 and 210.21. It has a disconnect within sight. The HOA's landscapers' gas cans are a larger fire risk. Brent bristled. Leah covered a smile with her notes. I played the state card without apology. Your authority here is limited. The law is clear. You can impose reasonable restrictions, paint color, cord management, hours of use noise limitations. You can't ban it, and you can't delay it past 60 days. Miranda flipped a page she had already read. We reserve the right to require a meter lock. The utility reserves that right, I said, not you. Leah took a breath like a swim teacher who sees a child about to jump unsafely. Can we verify with the city? She asked. I don't want to rely on assumptions. Please, I said, and tried not to look at the stack of fines the HOA had printed in duplicates. They agreed to pause the fines, pending city input. It was more mercy than I expected, and less than the law required. Dax patted my elbow under the table, the way a foreman comforts a nervous client whose drywall is still open. It'll be fine, the Pat said. Wires look messy until they don't. The city inspector, a man named Gamal, arrived on Friday with a tape measure, a voltage tester, and an expression that ricocheted between bored and benevolent. He looked at my EMT runs and grunted something that, in building inspector dialect, is a compliment. He checked the disconnect, the breaker size, the labeling. He asked Dax 2 questions in a language only electricians speak. Dax answered in the same language. Gamal signed the green sticker and said, "You can energize." We flipped the breaker. The charger's light came on. A patient white meant to signal readiness without boasting. That first column of electrons traveled from the grid, through copper, through silicon, into a battery that had spent its life waiting for people like us to stop being scared of future things. It felt like filling a glass with clean water in a thirsty place. The HOA sent an email an hour later. Unauthorized installation, fines resume. It was almost elegant in its denial of reality. I sent them a copy of the green sticker with an arrow drawn to the inspector's signature and the word approved in a city font that looked like a middle school's. I attached a copy of the state law again, a PDF of the city's EV-ready policy, and a paragraph that said, "Your continued attempts to interfere exceed your authority and constitute unreasonable restrictions. Cease." Miranda replied with one sentence. Your appeal will be heard at the next board meeting. The meeting fell on a Tuesday, the night our street normally pretends to forget that people have jobs. The clubhouse smelled like carpet and lemon cleaner and a recent argument. Neighbors drifted in, some curious, some furious, some simply bored. Janice took the front row with a steno pad like she was auditioning to be stenographer for the apocalypse. They let me speak for 3 minutes. 3 minutes is either short or infinite, depending on whether you've brought facts or feelings. I brought both, arranged in an order that would survive a small storm. Electric vehicles are here, I said. Our state passed a right to charge law. The city has an EV-ready policy and issued my permit. My installation is interior, inspected and safe. The HOA's role, if any, is to require reasonable restrictions. I'm happy to paint conduit or install a cord reel to keep it tidy. I'm not happy to be fined for complying with the law. Miranda read a statement, she always does, that sounded like it had been written by a person who trusts templates more than people. She said the board was concerned about precedent. She said allowing an interior charger without design review would open the door to kitchens in driveways. She said the board must defend aesthetic standards to preserve property values. Ray stared out the window like he wanted to live in a tree. Leah looked at me, the way you look at someone you'd be friends with if you weren't on a committee. Brent cleared his throat whenever he wanted to sound like authority in a commercial. A hand went up in the second row. Mr. Alvarez, who lives 3 doors down and never speaks in meetings because English is his third language, and he has work to do, stood. My wife, he said, choosing words like coins, has a CPAP. When the power goes out, we go to my brother's house across town. I nodded, unsure where he was going. He pointed at my charger. Your car, he said. It can power a fridge, a device, if we run a cord. Some EVs can run 120 V loads through an inverter, I said. Yes, mine can. Not the whole house, but enough for a CPAP, a fridge, lights. He nodded, sat, and the room shifted. Not a lot. Enough. Another hand. Priya, new to the neighborhood, voice careful. I don't have an EV, she said, but I want people who do to charge at home. It's safer than cords to the curb. Janice, who arrived ready to scold, surprised me. I hate cords, she said. On Halloween, on trash day, on any day. I also hate rules that pretend the city doesn't exist. They got a permit. We're not the grid. Leah turned a page and said, what if we write a policy? We don't ban. We define reasonable. No external conduit without paint to match. Cords managed. Charges mounted interior. City permit required. Approvals are administrative if city approves. Miranda, to her credit, didn't say no. She said what she always says when she has to swallow a new world. We'll take it under advisement. Ray raised his hand lazily. Or we can stop playing hero, he said, and let the law do what it already did. Brent moved that the fines be waived. Leah seconded. Miranda abstained, but didn't fight. The vote carried with 2 ayes and the sound of something heavy letting go. The next day, a heat advisory hit, the kind that makes asphalt sweat and tempers evaporate. At 4:11 p.m., lightning tripped a line somewhere west of us and half the neighborhood lost power. The grid did what grids do, isolate, reroute, apologize with blinking clocks. My charger's light went dark. The garage grew quiet in the way only the absence of hum can explain. I rolled my car forward, popped the frunk, and pulled out the inverter I keep in there the way some people keep jumper cables. I ran a 12-gauge extension, not across the driveway, Miranda. Relax. Out the side door to Alvarez's porch. He opened his door with a smile that looked like a prayer that had learned to walk. We plugged in the CPAP. It purred like a good cat. His wife came to the door and pressed her hand to his shoulder like a gratitude she didn't have English for. By 7 p.m., the power was back. At 7:03, Miranda sent a neighborhood email titled EV Charging Policy Draft. It was 2 pages, and for the first time since I moved here, a policy wrote itself the way nature writes creek beds. Numbers, distances, things you could measure with a tape instead of a feeling. Interior charges permitted by right with city permits. Exterior installations require paint to match, and cords concealed or reeled. No cords across sidewalks or driveways while in use. 60-day response window. Failure to respond equals approval. Reasonable restrictions defined as aesthetics and safety only, no bans. Inspections by the city control safety. The HOA defers. It wasn't poetry. It was better. The fines vanished. Adam, who had filmed my garage like a scene from a courtroom drama, stopped by with a coffee and an apology that looked like a kid's chorus. Rushed, earnest, almost in tune. I thought I was helping, he said. I'm still learning. So am I, told him, and I meant it. A week later, I found a note tucked under the magnet on my fridge. Grace, who lives on the other side of the block and drives a white hatchback that hums like a polite spaceship, wrote in neat print, "Saw your charger. Could you share your electrician's info? Also, can we talk about getting a small grant to help people install? My sister works at the utility. We formed a working group without calling it that. Grace brought the utility angle. Dax brought practical limits. Leah convinced Miranda to let us use the clubhouse for a Saturday clinic where we answered questions and passed out a one-pager titled EV Home Charging, What the HOA Needs and Doesn't. Marisol from the city came with her clipboard and patience and said, "Permits are your friend. Inspections are your shield. Don't fear them." A teenager asked if he could help, then installed 3 cord reels for 3 older neighbors and refused payment like it was a sport. Miranda hovered at the back and said nothing, which is agreement if you speak bored. When it ended, she stepped under the fluorescent lights and said, "Evan, about the policy, would you look at section 4? I want to be sure reasonable means the same thing to everyone." "It never does," I said, "but we can make it mean enough." We wrote enough into those 2 pages. We learned to love numbers. We banned feelings from what wires already knew. We stopped treating the future like a litigator and started treating it like a neighbor. It would be weird sometimes, loud sometimes, but often useful, and the only way to live with it was to invite it in and learn its name. A month later, at 8:06 on a Tuesday, I wasn't expecting to remember. I heard the sound that had started this whole thing, a snip. I looked up, heart in throat, ready to find a man in a vest and a red tag on my meter. It was June, Mr. Alvarez's granddaughter, cutting a ribbon on a cord reel we'd mounted in their garage. She giggled, spun the reel, and watched the line retract like a magic trick. "No trip," she said gravely, as if reciting a legal standard. We clapped, because for once, a rule and a child agreed. The next board newsletter featured a photo taken at our clinic. Me, Dax, Marisol, Leah, and, somewhat to her own surprise, Miranda, all standing in front of a whiteboard that read, "EV ready, city first. HOA coordinates, reasonable only." Underneath, Miranda had written in her careful teacher hand, "Questions, bring them." I kept the cut extension cord. I coiled it and put it on a shelf in the garage with a label, "The Day the Future Tripped." It sits above the charger, which hums quietly to itself at night, like a song I'm still learning to sing. Now when the compliance cart rolls by, Adam waves. When the garage door is up, the conduit gleams like it was always meant to be there. When the car plugs in, the light clicks from white to green, a tiny lantern that says ready charging, okay. Sometimes at 8:12 a.m. on a windless Wednesday, I stand in the driveway with my coffee and listen to nothing. No engine, no argument, just a street that learned a new routine. It took a cord, a statute, an electrician, a stubborn HOA president, a patient city clerk, a CPAP machine, and a room full of neighbors willing to think in amps instead of adjectives. They tried to block my EV charger. I cited state law and installed it anyway. The part I didn't expect, the part that kept people watching, wasn't the victory. It was what came after, a neighborhood that wrote the next paragraph together. The first week after the clinic, the neighborhood settled into what passes for peace. Lawnmower diplomacy, dogs negotiating fence lines, the compliance cart gliding by like a cautious swan. If you'd taken a photo at 7:30 p.m. and squinted, you'd think we were boring. Then the emails started. Subject lines like EV questions and charger inquiry, and one from a Gmail that just said, "Help." Our clubhouse clinic had been a pebble. The inbox was the ripples. 3 renters asked whether the right to charge protected them or just owners. Short answer, it protects the unit, not the title, and it obligates the association. The owner-landlord must cooperate. 2 condo owners wanted to know if they could tap the common meter and reimburse the HOA with a sub-meter. One neighbor said her landlord refused any drilling in his walls and asked whether she should go buy a gas car to appease the board. The future had sent us a line of applicants. We needed a system that wasn't just 2 guys with a whiteboard and a Saturday. Grace and I drafted a one-pager called EV at Cypress Bend, How We Charge Without Drama. It read like someone had translated civility into a recipe. City permit first, HOA email second, electrician schedule third, interior by right, exterior by application, cords reeled, transformers respected. We put Miranda's signature on the bottom, which she objected to and then didn't. We also got a note from a corner of the neighborhood we'd overlooked, the townhome court, where 8 units share a single slab of asphalt and the garages are converted bonus rooms. "Where do we charge?" a woman named April wrote. "I park under a maple." That email forced the conversation we'd been pretending to delay. Shared charging. The phrase puts a tremor in boards. It conjures trenches, RFPs, contracts, and the fatal word, amenities. Amenities are what you charge fees for after you promise not to. Miranda wanted to table it for the next budget cycle. April wrote back, polite as a bow, "School drop-off is this budget cycle." Nah, do. We formed a task group because when a neighborhood can't decide, it schedules. Leah chaired. I volunteered because I knew the grid in daylight and the board at night. Brent volunteered because if trenching was involved, he smelled work. Grace joined because she likes forms more than conflict. We invited 2 townhome residents, April and Marcus, who parks a battered pickup with a decal that reads, "My other car is also paid off." "Do 2 chargers at the clubhouse," Brent said in the first meeting, tapping the table with a pen like a nervy drummer. "Minimal trenching across the lawn, conduit up the wall, pedestal units. People can drive over to charge while they do the gym." He had a printout from a vendor I didn't recognize and an estimate that looked suspiciously like one bid. Brent is not a subtle man. "Townhomes are half a mile away," April said. "With a 3-year-old asleep in the back seat, the gym is Mars. Chargers near their parking," Leah said, writing and circling. "How many spaces?" 8, Marcus said. "We fight already." Grace sketched a simple map. A line of parking against a fence, a possible spot for 2 wall-mounted EVSs fed from a small panel upgrade, load sharing so both can run without popping breakers. "We could pilot with 2, she said. "Use a software lock and fobs. People pay per kW, no free squatting." Brent leaned back. "Good luck getting the utility to say the transformer can handle that." "You'd be surprised," I said. "Most neighborhood transformers are at half of nameplate except during heat waves." I pulled out my grid brain. If we set a price that encourages overnight charging and throttles during the 6-9 p.m. window, we can stay under peak. Also, the utility has a managed charging pilot. They'll give the HOA a rebate if we let them reduce power during emergencies. Miranda, who had come to watch the committee like a zookeeper eyes a cage, said, "Rebates are good. Rebates turn enemies into co-sponsors," Leah said. We put out a request for proposals that was basically a kind letter to contractors. "We don't want to be your training project, but we're not rich either." Brent's company submitted a bid to manage trenching, which made sense until we noticed he had paired it with a charger brand whose website was 2 pages of stock photos and a broken Contact Us form. Grace collected 3 more bids from companies with actual portfolios. Dax, to his credit, recused his shop and offered to be our owner's rep for free. "If you pick my competitor," he said, "I'll still sleep." We held a townhome parking lot meeting at noon on a Saturday. 8 households, 4 lawn chairs, 1 portable speaker that fell over whenever a breeze remembered itself. April presented the plan in the voice of a school counselor we all wanted to please. Marcus stood beside the hand-drawn map like a human easel. A woman named Dee raised her hand and said, "I don't have an EV. Do I have to pay?" "No," Leah answered immediately. "We'll create a restricted use assessment for users, a small monthly fee to cover capital, and a per kW rate to cover electricity and maintenance." "Can we tow gas cars that block the spots?" someone asked, and the parking lot made the sound of a congregation remembering fire. We tabled towing talk for another day and wrote polite signage first. EV charging only, while actively charging, 2-hour limit 6 to 10 p.m. 2 weeks later, the board approved the expenditure for 2 chargers at the townhomes and 2 at the clubhouse. Brent voted no for reasons that rhymed with losing the trenching contract. Ray said aye, as if he were cutting a ribbon with his eyes. Miranda abstained and then approved the minutes, which is the same as saying yes and saving face. Permits moved. The utility sent a planner who walked the court with me while I pretended not to be what I am for a living. He tapped the green metal pad mount transformer with his boot and said, "You'll be fine with 2 if you keep them under 6 kilowatts each during peak." "We can do that," I said. "Price signals and software." He grinned. "I like price signals. They make my phone ring less." By the time the townhome chargers went live, we had fobs handed out, a short FAQ taped to the boxes, and April's 3-year-old had learned to say "regulation" like it was a snack. The first night, 2 cars pulled in with shy movements like deer testing a stream. The chargers beeped and glowed, and the parking lot felt like a promise that had shown up wearing work boots. That same week, somebody cut the cable on the clubhouse charger. We found the severed end at dawn, copper glinting like a wound. The cut was clean, not gnawed. Bolt cutters, same as my extension cord months ago. In a neighborhood like ours, vandalism isn't random. It's a message with poor grammar. Miranda called me before she called anyone else, which I filed under progress. She stood by the pedestal with her dog and a face she saved for funerals and budget shortfalls. "We'll replace it," she said. "Insurance?" I asked. "We're under the deductible," she said. "I'll reallocate from decorative pond lighting." "You're going to anger the koi," I said. "They can learn to live with the dark," she said, almost smiling. The clubhouse camera had a partial view, a hoodie, a hat, a quick hand. It wasn't enough to arrest. It was enough to start a rumor. The app did what apps do, fed the worst story first. Janice posted "teen hooligans." Someone else said "outside agitators." Someone wrote "EV fire hazard retaliation," which made no sense if you've ever thought about physics for longer than a TikTok. We replaced the cable. We added a locking holster. We put up a sign that said "Smile, you're on camera," which always works until it doesn't. A week later, a sharp object gouged the paint on the townhome charger. Dee saw the taillights of a white pickup she didn't recognize leaving fast. April posted a photo of her son's toy dump truck parked beneath the charger with a band-aid stuck on the gouge. "We fixed it," she wrote, "because children always try." Marcus shrugged. "Could be anybody," he said. "We share this street with all kinds." Brent took a victory lap, quiet and petty. "Shared amenities bring thieves," he told Miranda at the board table in a voice pitched just above whisper. I heard him because I was standing behind the clubhouse microwave waiting for my coffee to stigmatize me. Miranda didn't bite. "So do poorly lit parking lots," she said, and later that night she installed 2 solar bollard lights by the chargers without telling anyone, which is the HOA equivalent of a love letter. The vandal hit one more time, then stopped. Whether bored, scared or satisfied, I don't know. The chargers kept charging. April texted me a photo of her dashboard with a little green car icon and the number 82% and 3 exclamation points. I saved it because people who work with systems rarely get sent gratitude in pixels. That should have been the season's main plot. But neighborhoods are anthologies. While one story resolves, another begins clearing its throat. In late July, 3 days into a heat wave that had turned lawns into brittle versions of themselves, the utility issued a flex alert: conserve, pre-cool, shift use. Most people ignored it. We did not. Grace rewrote our EV FAQ with one line bolded: "If you can, charge after 9 p.m. this week. Your grid thanks you." We taped it to chargers and posted it on the app and put one next to the lemonade at the pool, like the summer version of a PSA. At 6:41 p.m., the lights in my kitchen flickered in that way that means somewhere, something heavy tripped. The power dropped, came back, dropped again. My phone buzzed. Rotating outage, 60 minutes. I opened the garage and did the thing I'd done once before. Pulled out the inverter, ran a cord under the threshold, and went next door to Alvarez's. I'd barely set a foot on their porch when I saw Miranda across the street doing the same dance, with a borrowed inverter and a look that could be mistaken for panic. She caught my eye and said, "I have insulin in the fridge." "Plug here," I said, and she did. And for the next hour my car ran 2 refrigerators, 3 fans, and the little green light on a machine that keeps a grandmother sleeping. The grid is not a monolith. It is a quilt. That night, the patches held because a few of us had threaded the needle months earlier. When the lights came back, my phone buzzed again. A message from Miranda, not to the app, not to the board, but to me. "Thank you." 2 words full of the kind of surrender that isn't loss, it's growth. The August board meeting had 1 item and 1 guest. The Utilities Community Programs Manager, a woman named Tovi who could explain a tariff with a whiteboard and a joke. She walked us through managed charging, off-peak rates, and a pilot that would give our HOA a stipend to send a charge later signal during alerts. "Opt out anytime," she said. "We're nudging, not ordering." Ray leaned forward. "What's the upside for us?" "Money for maintenance and lower peaks," Tovi said, "which means fewer outages." Brent asked the question that lives in his spine. "What's the downside?" "You'll get 1 or 2 cranky emails from someone who wanted to charge at 6 p.m. "Sharp," she said. "We handle cranky for a living. You'll be fine. We voted to join." Miranda signed the MOU with a pen that had the Utilities logo on it, which is symbolism's way of patting itself on the back. The app announced the partnership. Most people shrugged. A few people said cool. One guy wrote an all-caps manifesto about freedom and plugs. The grid didn't read it. Somewhere in the productive calm of fall, Adam, our compliance aide, stopped by my driveway again, this time in city trainee khaki with a nameplate that wasn't laminated. "I start with code enforcement next month," he said, eyes shining in a way that made me forgive him for early sins of videography. "Figured I should tell you before you see me measuring things with a happier look on my face." "Going to miss the cart?" I asked. "I'll buy a toy one," he said. "Put it on my desk." We stood there on concrete that had survived more arguments than tires and talked like men who had disarmed. He asked about breaker labeling. I asked about civil service exams. He thanked me for not going nuclear in the early days. I thanked him for not turning into a caricature. None of it was required. All of it was glue. In October, Alvarez's granddaughter drew a picture at school of what powers your house. The other kids drew sun, lightning, a big rectangle labeled plug. June drew a car with a cord and a smiling fridge and wrote, "Thank you EV" in kid letters that don't care where vowels belong. Mrs. Alvarez taped it to their fridge, the one that had not lost a single strawberry that summer. We told that story at the annual meeting, and for once the annual meeting wasn't a fight about dues or decorations. It was a ceremony where people stood and said, "Here is a thing we did right," and then sat down astonished that a neighborhood could make that sentence. Which is why what happened in November stung the way an old wound does when rain is near. The notice arrived on a Thursday morning with the subject line, "New Safety Policy. Exterior electrical prohibited." It was written in that careful board voice we had come to know, legal phrasing over a layer of fear. "Due to increased fire risks," it began, "the board is instituting a moratorium on all exterior electrical work, pending an insurance review." I walked the paper to Miranda's porch instead of typing a fury. She opened the door before I knocked. "Insurance," she said. "They sent a bulletin. They're nervous about exterior outlets, especially for holiday lighting." "So we ban everything?" I asked. "Including existing car chargers?" "No," she said. "Interior use is fine. Exterior new work is paused. It's temporary." "How long?" She looked past me at nothing, then back. 60 days. We have to let them do their survey." I thought of April's townhomes and their exterior boxes. They're already in service. "They're fine," she said quickly. "Grandfathered." I nodded and let the anger breathe and pass. "Say that in the email," I told her, loud. We added a bolded line: "Existing exterior EVSs are unaffected." We held a forum with the insurance rep, who turned out to be a human man with a child who had once cried under a too loud Santa display. He said words like loss mitigation and risk premium, and then said, "I don't know EV like you do, teach me." We put Miranda's anxiety in context. We wrote a holiday lights addendum: timers, indoor rated cords indoors, outdoor rated cords outdoors, GFCI in use, off at midnight. Don't connect 47 inflatables to a single daisy chain like an act of defiance against physics. The insurance rep approved it and asked if he could use our handout with other HOAs. Miranda floated 3 inches somewhere between relief and pride. December arrived and no charges burned, no inflatables exploded, no insurance claims disappointed anyone's bonus. We added one line to our permanent policy: board may issue temporary moratoria during insurer surveys. Moratoria must be specific, time-limited, and accompanied by a rational basis. It is the sort of sentence only someone who has been burned by vague power writes. It is our scar tissue, and we are oddly fond of it. The slow winter months moved through us like a large, friendly animal. We held an electrical safety night at the clubhouse where Dax taught people the difference between a breaker and a demon, and Gamal told a story about a Christmas tree that had been more ambitious than its wiring. Miranda admitted softly that her brother's garage had once caught fire because of a space heater on a dollar store extension cord. The room folded around that confession like a hand around a candle. We didn't clap. We adjusted our faces to kindness. In January, a new family moved in at the end of the street, Sonia and Deshawn, with a toddler who discovered sidewalks like a country. They bought a plug-in hybrid because daycare drop-off requires range of a different kind. They came to a meeting on a Tuesday with questions written down and a baby sleeping across 2 forearms. Miranda welcomed them with a phrase I didn't know she knew how to say: "Interior charges are pre-approved. The city first, then we just keep a copy for records. If you need help with the permit, talk to Evan or Grace." I didn't hear my name because I was too busy looking at Miranda and thinking how a person becomes a bridge. Slowly, foot by foot, after someone shows them the river is crossable. In March, the utility sent us a check with a memo line that read, "Managed charging incentive." It wasn't much, enough to buy a spare cable, replace a cracked pedestal face, and host a pizza night where people came and told stories about things that had gone wrong and the people who had made them feel less alone. Adam came in his city uniform and took notes. He left early because he had a night class on public engagement, which is a course title for what some of us had been learning on our porches for a year. On a Friday in April, I found the old cut extension cord on my garage shelf. I should have thrown it out months ago. I didn't. I braided it into a loop and hung it on a nail above the charger like a trophy I didn't deserve and a warning I didn't want to forget. When the garage door is up, you can see it. A dead piece of rubber, a closed-mouth reminder that the quickest way to break a neighborhood is to cut what you don't understand. Our chargers hum now without fanfare. The townhome court has an informal culture. April charges before dinner, Marcus after 9. Dee charges Sunday morning while she walks and picks up trash other people pretend was inevitable. Alvarez's fridge keeps its strawberries, even when the grid burps. Miranda's email tone has softened by 3 adjectives and a footnote. Leah says, "Approve," with less fear. Brent lost the landscaping contract and still waves when he doesn't think I'm looking. When people ask me what happened at Cypress Bend, I don't talk about statutes or permits or the night the power flickered like a shy dancer. I tell them about June cutting the ribbon on a cord reel and declaring victory over trips. I tell them about Mrs. Alvarez's sleep. I tell them about a stop work order that became a policy, that became a clinic, that became a managed charging stipend that bought pizza, which is a sentence that makes no sense until you've been to 3 HOA meetings and learned to trust the boring parts. HOA tried to block my EV charger, I say, and people nod because they've seen that movie. I cited state law and installed it anyway, I say, and they smile because they love a reversal. But the part that keeps listeners from putting their phones down comes next. Then the HOA and the city and the utility and a dozen neighbors wrote down exactly how to charge without tripping anyone, including each other. The charger clicks at night from white to green. I still stand in the driveway sometimes with coffee and that dumb, helpful quiet. The future doesn't honk in this story. It nudges. It learns our names. It fixes the fridge for an hour when the sky decides to take a breath. And across the street, Miranda's porch light glows exactly the color the manufacturer intended. Neither warmer nor cooler. Not a compromise, but a choice. If you listen hard, over the far hum of a substation that is doing its best, you can hear a neighborhood that once argued about a cord and now argues about the best way to label the breaker panel so guests can find the right one in the dark. It's not heroism, it's maintenance. And if you've ever kept anything worth having, maintenance is the story. The email that made me sit up wasn't from the HOA or the utility. It was from Sonia down the block, subject line, "Weird hum. Is it my charger?" She'd had her plug-in hybrid for 3 weeks and had fallen into a rhythm that sounded like a lullaby. Plug at 9 p.m., green by morning, daycare at 8, charts in her head she didn't need paper for. That Thursday, a sound like a tired beehive drifted through her garage at dinner, then grew teeth. I walked over with my little multimeter like a security blanket for anxious circuits. The hum wasn't her EVs. It was the transformer at the end of our cul-de-sac, the green metal shoebox that makes high voltage polite enough to use. It wore a warm smell that wasn't panic yet, just the sweat of heavy load. The flex alert had ended. The air had dropped 5 degrees. Still, something was chewing. "Brent says it's the EVs," Sonia whispered, like the rumor was a living thing that might bite if you spoke too loud. "Brent blames EVs when his sprinklers underperform," I said. We stood in the easement grass and watched the box like it might confess. It didn't. Machines rarely do. At midnight, the transformer kicked its own breaker and the cul-de-sac went dark in a shy, embarrassed way. 5 minutes later, a utility truck rolled up. Tovi had warned dispatch that our neighborhood was now full of people who label breaker panels for recreation. The crew killed the street, popped the lid, and shone a light that made the innards look like a crime scene. A tech frowned, touched a hand near a coil without touching and said, "This isn't EV, this is continuous high draw on one phase." "Space heaters," I guessed. "Late October," he said. "Maybe. Or a dumb crypto rig." But the word traveled the way gossip likes to, through vents and side doors, under the lip of garage doors. In the morning, Janice posted a still from her camera. A neighbor's garage at 2 a.m., a glow behind a half-open door, the staccato of box fans. We follow rules for a living now, but suspicion moves faster than policy. A little chorus launched. See? It isn't that people hate the future, it's that they hate not being right about it. I asked Adam, now wearing his city code trainee khaki like an honor sash, to join me for a walk. We knocked, gentle. A man named Clay answered with eyes that had memorized the shape of worry. He worked nights. His nephew had convinced him mining was passive income like a backyard that mints. Clay's garage had 4 homemade racks, 6 GPUs a rack, wired to a power strip that was never meant to carry ambition. The fans were mischief, not menace. The wiring was both. "It paid $300 last month," he said, voice small, "and then the bill was $6. Adam, earnest, careful, explained load. I explained heat. We gave him Dax's number and 5 minutes to unplug it all before we made unplugging mandatory. He did. The transformer stopped sweating. The rumor lost its spine. I wanted to send a neighborhood-wide note titled "Blame Correctly," but Leah reminded me that labeling accurately is not the same thing as being humane. We settled for a bulletin on safe loads, GFCI, and call us before you plug your entrepreneurial dreams into the wall. Clay came to the next meeting and apologized in the old-fashioned way that softens a room. "I didn't know how electricity works," he said. "Now I know enough to be scared." There was a laugh no one intended. Miranda nodded, wrote "Educate first" on her copy of the agenda, and moved us on before Brent could turn the apology into a platform. That could have been a blip, the sort of anecdote neighborhoods chew and forget, but it reminded me of the thing we hadn't written yet. A resilience plan that wasn't just ad hoc chords when the sky hiccuped. The grid would have another bad day. We needed a better story when it did. We built one on a Tuesday with pizza and a whiteboard that had been a witness to 300 smaller problems. We called it the Orange Cord Map, which is not a bureaucratic name and therefore survived. The idea was insultingly simple. Households with vehicle-to-load capability or small inverters stuck an orange oval decal on their mailbox. A Google map, private to residents, listed who had which outlets and what they could power: CPAP, router, fridge, phone charging, fan. We printed tags for cords that said 120 V max, no heaters, in the kind of font that keeps insurance adjusters from aging prematurely. We added a line: no cords across sidewalks, run through side gates only. I drafted it. Miranda edited it. Gamal from Inspections red-inked the one sentence that sounded like a dare and turned it into a guideline. On a breezy Sunday, June and 3 kids under 11 walked the block sticking orange ovals on mailboxes and asking adults to promise out loud to help when the next hour-long dark rolled through. We turned mutual aid into a sticker scavenger hunt and thereby removed the parts that scare people who think help is a finite resource. When Tovi saw the map, she stole the idea and promised to rename it something that sounded like a grant proposal. In the quiet that followed, November's mild days, the good light that makes porches look like promises, Miranda did something I wouldn't have bet on last spring. She came to my garage with a Sharpie and asked to label her panel. "I can't read my electrician's hieroglyphics," she said, handing me a diagram that might have been Sanskrit. If I had to shut off the water heater fast, I'd be at the mercy of luck. We did it the way you do anything worth doing. Slow, with a little humor. We tripped one breaker at a time and shouted to the kitchen to see if the microwave clock died. We found the rogue leg that fed the porch light. We put laminated labels on each breaker and a map inside the door. We wrote EV charger, future, on an empty slot, and Miranda didn't flinch. When we finished, she stood in the neat rectangle of conduit and wire and said, "You know, I thought being president meant preventing ugly things. Lately it's felt more like preventing stupid things." "That's leadership," I said. "Fewer stupid things." She laughed, the first honest one I'd heard in her voice in a year. "Fewer, not none," she said, and the distinction felt like an adult had entered the room. December delivered a wind event that threw branches like arguments. The power went out in streaks and patches, not everywhere, just enough to remind us we live in a web. The orange cord map lit up. Alvarez's dot turned green. Dee's dot turned green. Sonia's dot turned green. For 60 minutes, our cul-de-sac was cars feeding tiny loads like hummingbirds. I walked our short street and saw 3 cords tucked through side gates like polite snakes. No sidewalk crossings, no space heaters, no fools. A feat. We learned a different lesson in January when a man named Garth, 2 streets over, bought a level 2 charger off a discount site that spelled warranty with a Y in the wrong place. He installed it himself, which is American for "I watched 3 videos and believed in talk." His aluminum wiring and an overloaded outlet faceplate turned into toast behind drywall. and a garage fire chewed through 2 shelves before the GFCI tripped and the foam extinguishers did their ancient holy work. A neighbor posted the smoke plume on the app with the speed that morbidity prefers. "UV fire," someone typed, before the firefighters had even rolled their hose. It wasn't. The investigators wrote, "Overheated receptacle, improper installation," on a form that will outlive all of us. Garth came to our clinic with eyebrows 2 weeks away from regrowing and asked if we had a real electrician. Dax didn't gloat. He just quoted him a price, and after the work was done, walked him through every label like he was explaining a language he wanted the man to love. Miranda asked me to draft a 1-pager, "How not to burn your garage." We put EV charging at the top because of the rumor economy, then added space heaters and Christmas lights and standalone freezers bought at yard sales. We used pictures, we used bullets, we used no adjectives. The neighborhood posted it on fridges. The insurance rep asked again if he could copy it. Miranda told him yes, with the condition he'd send us his holiday lights sheet every year before he sent it to other HOAs. We'd built a truce with our insurer, which is like making friends with your dentist. Not glamorous, better than the alternative. Spring arrives here in a series of false starts and sincere apologies. The magnolia threw its blossoms like paper plates. The chargers hummed their low song. The townhome court had developed culture. April taped a "charging tonight, text me" sign near the panel, and Marcus, gruff in all other areas, became the unofficial slot swapper, moving cars like chess pieces so everyone went to bed topped up. The bollard lights Miranda had installed cast little moons on the asphalt. Dee's Sunday pickups of stray litter turned into a casual roster. We had created a tiny city within a neighborhood and forgotten to call it that. Then came the election. Every HOA election smells faintly of Thanksgiving. Family dynamics, a history you didn't choose, cranberry sauce you pretend to like because tradition. Ray decided not to run again. I want to spend my remaining afternoons fishing for carp that don't want me, which left a seat open. Brent ran, of course, because every story needs a man who thinks dissent and sabotage are synonyms. A newcomer named Eli ran too. A middle-aged engineer who'd been quietly present at our clinics and loudly useful when a storm moved a fence 5 inches into a property line. Brent's campaign was simple. Amenities cost money. The board must say no. He used a photo of the clubhouse charger with a chain lock on the cable after the vandalism, as if it were evidence of moral decay. He muttered the word liability at doorsteps like it could summon the ghost of a lawsuit to scare votes toward him. He singled out the townhome chargers as a slippery slope toward condo socialism, an oxymoron that caused Dax to choke on a donut and me to wish for a rule that fined phrases. Eli's campaign was simpler: write clear rules, follow the city, teach each other. He knocked on doors with a stack of our 1-pagers and a quiet that made people unafraid to ask the question they thought would make them look dumb. He didn't mention EVs unless the door did. He talked about fences, sheds, paint, trees, and how to disagree in print without losing your Saturday to rage. Election night at the clubhouse boiled down to a moment that belongs in small civics textbooks. During Q&A, Brent waved the vandalized cable photo. "This is what happens," he said, "when you invite the future to park on common property." From the back row, Mr. Alvarez stood. He doesn't stand for politics. He stands to help someone lift a couch. That night, he stood for his wife's sleep. When the power went out, he said, "A neighbor's car kept my wife breathing. That was not an amenity. That was a community." The room moved, not dramatically, enough. Eli won by 8 votes. Brent stormed out, which is exercise if you do it often. Under Eli's hand, the board did something I didn't realize I'd been aching for. Codified our messy, evolving EV practices into a 4-page policy that read like a competent small town had written it. Interior EVs. Permitted by right with city permit, submit copy for records, deemed approved in 60 days if no response. Exterior EVs, allowed with paint to match, cord management and city sign-off. HOA review, limited to aesthetics, placement and sightlines. Shared EVs. Board may approve for townhome courts and common lots with cost recovery via user fees. Software for load sharing. Price signals aligned with utility off-peak. Resilience use. During declared outages, temporary cords may supply critical loads through side gates only, no heaters. Max 125. Cords must be labelled orange resilience. Moratoria, allowed only with insurer request. Must be specific and time-boxed. Grandfathering explicit. City electrical inspections remain the safety authority. Enforcement. No fines while a timely permit is pending and work is interior. Violations must be documented with photos and a specific rule cited. We printed it on paper thick enough to make a satisfying thump when dropped on a table. Miranda smiled when she signed. Eli added his name. Leah added a smiley face in the margin because she is constitutionally incapable of not leaving a kindness where a hard edge used to be. Summer brought a story I did not plan to star in. My dad had a small stroke, not catastrophic, not cinematic, just that tiny, traitorous clot finding an exit ramp in a brain that had been loyal for 71 years. He moved in with me for 6 weeks while he learned to be left-handed for things that had been right-handed forever. He called the charger the robot and asked if it made toast. He sat in a folding chair in the garage in the evenings and watched the light click from white to green with the fascinated patience of a man who has learned to love boring victories. Steady heart rate, clear speech, walking unassisted. The neighbors waved with a gentleness that did not perform itself on apps. Mrs. Alvarez brought rice and beans so good, my dad considered faking a relapse to extend the supply. Miranda dropped off a folder with the phrase, "When you need city stuff," on the tab, and a handwritten list of phone numbers that have a way of shortening bad days. One night, the power hiccuped for 10 minutes, the kind that would once have been a plot point. I rolled the car forward without thinking. My dad pointed at the orange cord tag and said, "You people write everything down." "We forget otherwise," I said. He nodded. "That's what a neighborhood is for," he said, and I decided to keep that sentence somewhere safe. In September, a reporter from the local paper called. She wanted to do a feel-good grid story, which is to journalism what fun run is to exercise. Well-intentioned, likely sweaty. She asked if we had any color. I told her about the orange cord map, the bollards, the night misses. Alvarez slept to the hum of my inverter, the time a crypto rig tried to cosplay as a civic lesson. She came to the clubhouse clinic, scribbled, took a photo of Eli drawing arrows between city, utility, and HOA, like a three-way handshake. The article ran on a Thursday with the headline, "This HOA didn't ban the future, it wrote it down." We taped it to the clubhouse corkboard at an angle because nothing sincere hangs perfectly straight. A week later, a different HOA 3 miles away emailed Miranda, subject line EV policy, and then, "Can we steal?" Miranda wrote back, "Please do." She attached the PDF and one line, "Make it yours, keep the numbers." We are not saints. A man 2 blocks over still insists on plugging a 50-foot cord into an outlet and running it under his garage door like a snake on Rumspringa. Adam wrote him up kindly. He snarled, "We will probably have this conversation annually until he moves or learns humility." A newcomer parked his diesel in the townhome EV spot, and Marcus left a note that ranked as poetry in our zip code. "Charge here when you have something to charge." He moved the truck. No tow, no fight, no martyrdom. On Halloween, a different kind of light filled the cul-de-sac. Kids in capes argued about whether a skeleton can be a doctor. The arch went up in the right-of-way again and came down at midnight because promises have muscle memory. Someone asked if we could run orange fairy lights to match the orange cord program. Leah vetoed it on brand standards grounds. We pretended to disagree, so she felt useful. Late that night, as we coiled extension cords and collected wrappers that physics had insisted on redistributing, Miranda stood in my driveway and looked at the charger like it had been there since 1998. I used to think order was fragile, she said, something you had to defend from people. Lately, I think order is what you get when you give people instructions and trust. Plus pizza, I said. Plus pizza, she agreed. We have learned to quantify incentives properly. In November, the state legislature updated the right to charge statute, clarified a clause about renter rights, added language about submetering, required HOAs to designate a point of contact for EV requests with a real email that didn't bounce. Leah forwarded it to the board with the subject line, "Legislature wrote our minutes for us." We updated our policy in an hour. The maintenance of rules is the sleep of self-government. You don't notice until it's bad. By winter, the only time our EV policy came up was when someone new moved in, asked, "Do you allow chargers?" and got to watch 3 neighbors talk over each other because sometimes competence can't help showing off. We always ended with, "City first, then send the HOA the permit copy. Mount inside if you can. If outside, match paint, keep cords tidy. If the power goes out, knock on the orange ovals. Don't be a hero, be boring." One more thing happened, and it's the one I replay in my head when I wonder whether any of this mattered. Sonia's toddler got a fever sky high on a Sunday night that had no open urgent care and too much fear in its weather. They packed the car in a panic to drive to the ER. The hybrid wouldn't start. Dead 12 volt, a thing that happens, a thing that feels like betrayal. I heard the quiet curse from my porch. I walked over with my portable jump pack because my garage looks like a hardware store got emotional. We popped the hood. The pack clicked on. The car woke. "Thank you," Sonia said, in that wet-eyed way that makes any man her brother for 14 seconds. When they came home at 3, the fever lower, the medicine working, they left a note on my doormat that read, "It's small until it isn't. Thank you for all the small things." I put it in the same drawer as my dad's good watch, because someday I will need to take it out and remember what maintenance feels like. If you're still wondering whether installing a charger was the story, whether the hook, "they tried to stop me," was the meal, here's the answer we wrote with the months that followed. The charger was the pretext. The plot was how we learned to use rules to make room, how we mistook enforcement for care until care taught us enforcement's real job, how a man with bolt cutters in my driveway became a footnote in a longer essay about teaching a place to live with the future without tripping over it. We still label things, we still argue at meetings and then send each other recipes for the sides we brought. We still have a cord on a nail above the charger that says, "Remember." We still keep the orange ovals on the mailboxes because the next storm doesn't care that the last one taught us manners. We still laugh when Eli writes "reasonable only" on the whiteboard every 3rd meeting like a ritual we are happy to keep practicing. And at 8:12 a.m., on windless Wednesdays when the sun hits the garage just so, the conduit gleams like intention, the charger clicks from ready to charging, and the future, not heroic, not loud, not viral, does what we hired it to do. Show up, behave, help.